Liberia's silent revival, the ongoing fight to fulfill its name, and the young people leading the charge. Listen, I want to give you a preview of chapter 1 and 2 to see what this book is about. Check it out. I want you to hear it. God bless. Chapter 1. Let's first go back. A brief look into our country's history. Chapter by Minister Divine Victor. Liberia is a country established in 1847 by the American Colonization Society. It was firstly named Christopher, and its capital city was Dukas. The first president of this country at that time was President Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Our country's beginnings are that of freed slaves from America, that America wanted to bring back to their homeland of Africa. Being that they were freed slaves, they needed to be colonized in their own homeland. In so doing, a group of Americans made arrangements with Africa to find a place for the early settlers to go. This country was named Liberia because after the return of the free black slaves from America, the settlers thought it wise that as free slaves, they needed to live with freedom and liberty. The settlers saw it as a necessity to name their own land. The land was bought and was given to these early settlers by the American Colonization Society, ACS. Liberia means a free land of liberty. Moreover, the national motto statement on the Liberian seal also makes it very clear. It says, and I quote, "The love of liberty brought us here." This is a clear picture of how this country has so dearly longed for a perfect freedom. It was the dream and heart desire of our forefathers, and they continually cried and struggled for a genuine freedom. It was their unwavering goal. Most assuredly, Liberia is a perfect and free country, despite all the hard times we went through. Liberia remains completely free. Since 1822, which was the purchase time for this land, currently known as Liberia, we have been totally free. The desire to be free started from the point at which we were slaves in the United States of America. The slavery that we have known and been in started from here in Africa before they brought us to the United States and other countries as slaves in their country. There was a system called the battle system, where people traded food for food, clothes for clothes, and even house for house. This was a nice system, organized among the first people that were living on the land. As time went on, not everyone could afford it. So the poorer settlers began to give their children to those who had much wealth for few things they wanted, like food, clothes, and shelter. As the children grew up, they even worked for what their parents had taken from those with whom they worked for. This was a common practice of the natives until they had more people in their homes as slaves. Also, some were captured from tribute wars. Editor's note: a tribute war is a war between one tribe and a nearby tribe in a kingdom. When the white man came to Africa, they were continuing the same system that was already in place here. They started to give their Western materials, such as cooking utensils, mirrors, and shoes, to the kingdom leaders. Editor's note: leaders like King. All right, there you have chapter 1. Now, let's get right into chapter 2, a preview of chapter 1. Let's get into a shortened preview of chapter 2, a more serious chapter. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Amen. Chapter 2. A war truly like no other. Chapter by Evan Jairus J. Colo, student of New Testament Baptist Bible College, studying Christian theology major. Editor's note: how nice it would be if the rest of history and the rest of this book from here on was, and they all lived happily ever after. Sadly, as we know, the blood that would be shed in the times to come would have had these early settlers who so longed for liberty turning in their graves. Of course, war is nothing new or unique to Liberia by any means. But read intently 24-year-old Evan Jairus J. Colo shared his summary and thoughts on the 14-year civil war that would shake Liberia at its core. There have been many wars fought around the world, and even up to this day as we speak. But with the devastating 14 years of tribal and civil conflict in Liberia, only 3 words are needed to describe that very dark and difficult time in Liberia's history: bloody, deadly, and hopeless. Indeed, it was a very bloody war, a deadly war, and above all, a hopeless war. One that left most of the country suffering post-traumatic stress and made it very hard to continue life as a normal human being. The 14-year war, which was fought from 1989 to 2003 in Liberia, can be referred to as the worst disgrace and disregard of human rights and dignity. Human rights and dignity were looked down on very bad and very wickedly in our country. Heading: The Bloody, Deadly, and Hopelessness of Liberia's Civil War. There was much bloodshed from start to end of the war. Blood was greatly shed because it started among tribal groups and was fought by untrained soldiers. The Geo people of Nimba County against the Kron people of Grand Gede County. Both tribes started to kill each other very wickedly and cruelly and treated others with disrespect. The war and its bloodiness soon spread throughout the country faster because of the involvement of President Samuel Kenyon Doe, the president at the time. President Doe supported his tribal people, the Kron, with the Liberian army, and they started to take advantage of the remaining 14 tribal or ethnic groups. During this time, according to eyewitnesses, people on both sides were killing and mistreating each other wickedly than any other countrymen, citizens, would do to their fellow citizens. Now let me paint a picture for you of the reality of the situation and the reality many people faced. A group of rebels, or even the government itself, late at night would plot to kill all the people of their opposition tribal communities while asleep in their homes. In response to the constant violent violation and killings, that same community would then form their own rebel group to protect their counties and territories' people. This is how the many rebel groups evolved and came to be. People were burned with tires on the street. Many were brutally killed at checkpoints, while the majority of Liberian girls and women were raped by those untrained soldiers of every war group. Women and girls were forced to be used. All right, there you have it. There you have it. Now listen, like I said, that is just a sample of chapter 1 and 2. And yes, chapter 2, obviously, some very hard listening, I'm sure, tough reading. But you know what? Let me just assure you, this is not a negative book. This is not it's not a negative focus or only book. But I assure you, there is lots of life and inspiration in it. You'll hear the reality, but it's not to keep you in a place of despair or discouragement or heaviness even. Okay? Coming up in the next chapter, you'll hear, yes, Everett J. Jairus Colo, he wrote that chapter 2. You'll read a testimony of his life before Christ. And then later on, his testimony after receiving Christ, what God has done. You'll read the testimony of a very successful man, like a very touching and inspirational story. You're going to hear a lot of inspiration in it. So listen, I want to encourage you, pick up your copy today. Support the cause. Get the audiobook. Okay, and even buy the actual book on Amazon. Okay, support the cause, get involved, hear what God is doing, and watch. Your heart may be burdened to help out in some creative, powerful ways. You never know. But the main thing is, you cannot read this, in my strong belief, you cannot read this and not want to help in some kind of capacity. And that entirely through and through is my motive and my heart in really sharing this with you. God bless you as you just support what God is doing around the